Let me tell you something that will fundamentally change how you think about yourself, your species, and the future of everything you know. In 1 million years, if humanity still exists, we won't be human anymore. Not in any sense that you or I would recognize. The beings that descend from us will be as different from modern humans as we are from the earliest bacteria that emerged in the primordial oceans billions of years ago. This isn't science fiction. This isn't speculation. This is the inevitable consequence of the forces that have shaped every living thing on this planet for 3.8 billion years. Forces that haven't stopped, that can't stop, that will continue to operate whether we want them to or not. Evolution doesn't have a destination. It doesn't have a plan. It's just the relentless accumulation of changes over time, driven by random mutation and natural selection. And on a time scale of 1 million years, those changes add up to something unrecognizable. We won't be human anymore. And understanding why requires understanding the terrifying power of deep time and the forces that have always shaped life on Earth. Let me start by giving you a sense of scale, because I think most people dramatically underestimate what 1 million years actually means. 1 million years is a number that's easy to say, but almost impossible to truly comprehend. So let me try to put it in perspective. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, have existed for about 300,000 years. That's how long our species has been around, from the earliest anatomically modern humans in Africa to you and me sitting here today. All of human history, all of human civilization, all of human culture, everything that makes us who we are has happened in that 300,000-year window. 1 million years is more than 3 times longer than our entire existence as a species. Let me put it another way. If you compress the entire history of Homo sapiens into a single day, 24 hours, then 1 million years would be more than 3 days. Everything you know about humanity, from the first cave paintings to the smartphone in your pocket, would fit into that single day. And we're talking about what happens in the 3 days that follow. Or consider this, 1 million years ago, there were no modern humans, none. Our ancestors at that time were Homo erectus, a different species entirely, with smaller brains, different bodies, and no language, no art, no technology beyond simple stone tools. If you met a Homo erectus on the street today, you wouldn't see a primitive human. You'd see something that looks almost but not quite human, something uncanny, something other. That's how much can change in 1 million years, and that's how much will change in the next million years if we survive that long. Now, you might be tempted to think that evolution has stopped for humans, that we've somehow stepped outside the process that shaped every other species on Earth. That modern medicine, technology, and civilization have made natural selection irrelevant. This is wrong, profoundly, fundamentally wrong. Evolution hasn't stopped, it's changed. The selective pressures that shape us are different from what they were for our ancestors on the African savanna. But selective pressures still exist, and they're still operating. And over 1 million years, they will reshape us into something unrecognizable. Let me explain how this works. Evolution operates through 2 main mechanisms: random mutation and natural selection. Random mutations happen all the time. Every time a cell divides, there's a chance of copying errors in the DNA. Every time you're exposed to radiation from the sun, from cosmic rays, from natural radioactivity in the environment, there's a chance of mutations. Every generation, the human genome accumulates about 60 to 100 new mutations that weren't present in the parents. Most of these mutations are neutral, they don't do anything noticeable. Some are harmful and are quickly eliminated by natural selection. But a few are beneficial, giving their carriers a slight advantage in survival or reproduction. These beneficial mutations spread through the population over time. Natural selection is the process by which beneficial mutations spread and harmful mutations are eliminated. It's not a conscious process, it's just the statistical consequence of some individuals having more offspring than others. If a mutation makes you slightly more likely to survive and reproduce, that mutation will become more common in subsequent generations. If a mutation makes you slightly less likely to survive and reproduce, it will become less common. This process never stops. As long as there's variation in the population, as long as some individuals have more offspring than others, evolution continues. It doesn't matter how advanced your civilization is, how good your medicine is, how comfortable your life is. Evolution is always operating, and over 1 million years, even small selective pressures produce enormous changes. Let me give you some concrete examples of how humans might evolve over the next million years. Let's start with the brain, because this is where some of the most dramatic changes might occur. The human brain is the most complex structure we know of in the universe. It contains about 86 billion neurons, connected by trillions of synapses, capable of generating consciousness, language, abstract thought, and everything else that makes us human. But the brain is also expensive. It consumes about 20% of our body's energy, despite being only about 2% of our body weight. This energy cost has historically limited brain size. Our ancestors couldn't afford bigger brains because they couldn't get enough calories to fuel them. But that constraint has largely disappeared for modern humans. We have abundant food. We have technology that reduces the physical demands on our bodies. We have medicine that allows individuals with large, metabolically expensive brains to survive and reproduce. This suggests that one selective pressure, the caloric cost of large brains, has been relaxed, but other selective pressures may now favor larger or more complex brains. Consider, in modern society, intelligence is strongly correlated with economic success, social status, and in some contexts, reproductive success. People who can navigate complex social environments, solve abstract problems, and innovate technologically tend to do well. This creates a selective pressure favoring cognitive abilities. Now, 1 million years is a long time. If there's even a slight selective advantage to higher intelligence, even a fraction of a % increase in reproductive success, that advantage will compound over thousands of generations. The result could be dramatically increased cognitive abilities, larger brains, or brains that are structured differently to process information more efficiently. What might this look like? We can only speculate. Perhaps our descendants will have larger skulls to accommodate bigger brains. Perhaps their brains will be more densely packed with neurons. Perhaps they'll have entirely new cognitive abilities that we can't even imagine, the way we have cognitive abilities like language and abstract mathematics that our primate ancestors couldn't imagine. But intelligence isn't the only factor. The brain is also the seat of emotions, social behavior, and personality. Selective pressures on these traits could also reshape our psychology in profound ways. Consider empathy. In a highly interconnected, cooperative society, empathy might be strongly advantageous. Individuals who can understand others' perspectives, cooperate effectively, and maintain social bonds might have higher reproductive success. Over 1 million years, this could produce beings with vastly enhanced empathic abilities, perhaps even forms of emotional connection or communication that we would perceive as telepathic. Or consider aggression. In a world of abundant resources and strong social institutions, aggression might become disadvantageous. Violent individuals might be ostracized, imprisoned, or otherwise prevented from reproducing. Over time, this could produce a much less aggressive species, beings who find violence not just wrong, but literally unthinkable as alien to their psychology as cannibalism is to most modern humans. The point is that our psychology, like our bodies, is subject to evolution. The beings who exist in 1 million years will not just look different, they'll think differently, feel differently, experience the world differently. Their inner lives will be as foreign to us as our inner lives would be to a chimpanzee. Now let's talk about the body, because physical changes are perhaps easier to imagine than psychological ones. Human bodies have changed significantly over the past few 100,000 years. We've become taller, our faces have become flatter, our jaws have become smaller. These changes have been driven by a combination of natural selection and changes in diet and lifestyle. What physical changes might occur over the next million years? One possibility is that we'll become more gracile, more lightly built, with thinner bones and less muscle mass. This trend has been occurring for thousands of years as our technology has reduced the physical demands of survival. We no longer need the raw strength that our ancestors needed to hunt, fight, and survive in a harsh environment. If this selective pressure continues, if physical strength becomes increasingly irrelevant to survival and reproduction, our descendants might be significantly frailer than us. Another possibility involves our sensory systems. Our eyes, ears, and other senses evolved to help us survive in a specific environment, the African savanna. But that environment is no longer relevant for most humans. We live in artificial environments, surrounded by technology that extends and modifies our senses. Over time, this could reshape our sensory systems. Perhaps our eyes will become more adapted to reading screens and less adapted to scanning distant horizons. Perhaps our hearing will become more sensitive to the frequencies of human speech and less sensitive to the sounds of predators or prey. Perhaps entirely new senses will emerge. Perhaps integration with technology will become so deep that future humans will have senses we can't even conceptualize. Our hands might change too. The human hand is a remarkable tool, evolved for both precision grip and power grip, capable of making tools, writing, and countless other tasks. But the tasks we use our hands for are changing. We type more than we write. We tap screens more than we manipulate physical objects. Over 1 million years, these changes in how we use our hands could reshape them perhaps longer, more dexterous fingers for fine manipulation, or perhaps a reduction in physical capability as more tasks are delegated to machines. And then there's the question of height. Humans have been getting taller for centuries, driven by improvements in nutrition and health. If this trend continues, our descendants might be significantly taller than us, or if selective pressures change, if resources become scarce, or if smaller bodies become advantageous for some reason, they might become shorter. The truth is, we can't predict exactly what physical changes will occur. Evolution doesn't follow a predetermined path. It responds to selective pressures, and those pressures will depend on factors we can't foresee, changes in climate, technology, society, and environment that will unfold over the next million years. What we can say with confidence is that physical changes will occur. The human body is not static. It's the product of evolution, and evolution never stops. Now let me talk about something that makes the next million years fundamentally different from any previous period in evolutionary history: technology. For 3.8 billion years, evolution on Earth has been driven by natural processes, random mutation, and natural selection operating on biological organisms. But humans have introduced something new: the ability to deliberately modify our own biology. We already have technologies that can alter the human genome. CRISPR and other gene editing tools allow us to make precise changes to DNA. In vitro fertilization allows us to select embryos with desired traits. As these technologies advance, we'll gain increasing control over our own evolution. This is called directed evolution or self-directed evolution, and it changes everything. Natural evolution is slow. It takes thousands of generations for significant changes to accumulate. Directed evolution could be fast, potentially producing dramatic changes in just a few generations. What might we choose to change about ourselves? We might eliminate genetic diseases, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease. All of these are caused by specific genetic mutations that we could potentially edit out of the human genome. Within a few generations, these diseases could become extinct. We might enhance desirable traits, higher intelligence, better memory, longer lifespan, greater resistance to disease. All of these might be achievable through genetic modification. Parents might be able to choose these traits for their children, selecting for the best possible combination of genes. We might add entirely new capabilities. Genetic engineering could potentially give us abilities that no human has ever had the ability to see in ultraviolet or infrared, enhanced night vision, immunity to all known diseases, the ability to regenerate lost limbs, even the ability to photosynthesize like a plant. Over 1 million years, these technologies will advance in ways we can't predict. What starts as modest genetic tweaks eliminating a disease here, enhancing a trait there, could eventually become wholesale redesign of the human organism. And here's the key point. Once we start directing our own evolution, there's no reason to think we'll stop. Each generation will have the ability to modify the next, building on previous changes. The cumulative effect over thousands of generations could be transformative beyond our ability to imagine. This is why I say we won't be human anymore. Natural evolution alone would change us significantly over 1 million years. But directed evolution could change us far more dramatically, far more quickly. The beings that descend from us might be as different from modern humans as we are from the simplest bacteria. But there's another possibility that I haven't mentioned yet, a possibility that might be even more transformative than genetic engineering. What if our descendants aren't biological at all? Let me explain what I mean. We're currently in the early stages of developing artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, and other technologies that blur the line between human and machine. These technologies are advancing rapidly, and over the next few decades, let alone the next million years, they could fundamentally change what it means to be human. Consider brain-computer interfaces. We already have primitive versions of these cochlear implants for the deaf, deep brain stimulators for Parkinson's disease. But more advanced versions are in development, including interfaces that could allow direct communication between brains and computers. As these technologies advance, the line between human and machine will blur. We might augment our brains with silicon components that enhance memory, processing speed, or sensory capabilities. We might connect our brains directly to the internet, allowing instant access to all human knowledge. We might network our brains together, creating forms of collective intelligence that transcend individual consciousness. Over time, these augmentations might become more and more extensive. The biological components might become less and less important. Eventually, we might reach a point where the biological brain is just a small part of a much larger cognitive system, or where the biological brain has been replaced entirely by artificial substrates. This is the possibility of mind uploading, transferring human consciousness from biological brains to artificial hardware. If this becomes possible, and many researchers believe it will, our descendants might not be biological at all. They might be digital beings existing as patterns of information in computer systems, potentially immortal, potentially able to copy themselves, potentially able to exist in virtual realities of their own design. This would be the ultimate transformation from biological organisms subject to aging, disease, and death to digital entities potentially immune to all of these, from beings confined to physical bodies in a physical universe, to beings who can exist in any computational substrate, anywhere in the cosmos, would such beings still be human? Would they still be us? I don't think so. They would be our descendants, our heirs, the continuation of the project that began when the first self-replicating molecules appeared in the primordial oceans. But they wouldn't be human in any sense we would recognize. We won't be human anymore, and the process that will transform us is already underway. In part 2, I want to explore these possibilities in more detail. I want to talk about the specific paths our evolution might take, the branching possibilities that could lead to multiple successor species, and the profound questions that arise when we contemplate our own transformation. Because the future of humanity is not a single destination, it's a vast space of possibilities, and understanding those possibilities is essential to understanding who we are and what we might become. So we've established that evolution never stops, that 1 million years is an almost incomprehensible span of time, and that the combination of natural evolution and directed technological modification will transform humanity into something unrecognizable. We won't be human anymore, not in any sense that you or I would understand. Now I want to go deeper. I want to explore the specific pathways this transformation might take, the branching possibilities that could lead not to one successor species, but to many, and the profound implications of contemplating our own obsolescence. Because here's something I haven't mentioned yet. When we talk about what humans will look like in 1 million years, we're probably not talking about a single species. We're probably talking about dozens, perhaps hundreds, perhaps thousands of different species, descendants of Homo sapiens, who have diverged so dramatically that they can no longer interbreed, can no longer communicate, can barely recognize each other as kin. This is the terrifying and fascinating truth about deep evolutionary time. Species don't just change, they split, they branch, they radiate into new ecological niches, new environments, new ways of being. And humanity, if it survives for 1 million years, will almost certainly do the same. Let me explain how this works. Throughout the history of life on Earth, successful species have tended to diversify. When a species is successful, when it spreads to new environments, when it develops new capabilities, when it escapes from previous constraints, it tends to split into multiple descendant species, each adapted to a different niche. Consider the mammals. 66 million years ago, when the dinosaurs went extinct, mammals were small, marginal creatures, mostly nocturnal, mostly insectivorous, living in the shadows of the dominant reptiles. But when the dinosaurs disappeared, mammals exploded into the empty ecological niches. Within a few million years, they had diversified into thousands of species: whales, bats, elephants, primates, rodents, carnivores, occupying every conceivable environment, from the deep oceans to the highest mountains. This is called adaptive radiation, and it's one of the fundamental patterns of evolution. When a lineage gains access to new opportunities, whether through mass extinction, the evolution of a key innovation, or the colonization of a new environment, it tends to diversify rapidly. Humans are poised for exactly this kind of radiation. Think about it. We've already spread to every continent on Earth. We're developing the technology to colonize other planets, other moons, eventually other star systems. We're gaining the ability to modify our own biology, to adapt ourselves to new environments, rather than waiting for natural selection to do it for us. Over 1 million years, these capabilities could produce an extraordinary diversification. Humans adapted to living in space with different bodies and physiologies than Earth-bound humans. Humans adapted to Mars, to Europa, to the moons of Saturn. Humans modified for different purposes: physical labor, intellectual work, artistic expression. Humans who have merged with machines, existing as cyborgs or as purely digital entities. Each of these populations separated by vast distances or incompatible biology or different technological platforms, would evolve independently. They would accumulate different mutations, experience different selective pressures, make different choices about how to modify themselves. Over time, they would diverge first into varieties, then into subspecies, then into fully separate species. This is called speciation, and it's how new species arise. When populations are separated and can't interbreed, they accumulate differences until they're no longer compatible. Given enough time, they become different species, related by ancestry, but distinct in form and function. 1 million years is more than enough time for this to happen many times over. The descendants of humanity could include dozens or hundreds of species spread across the solar system and perhaps beyond, as different from each other as lions are from dolphins, as eagles are from snakes. We won't be human anymore, and we won't even be one thing. We'll be many things, a whole family of post-human species, each adapted to its own niche, each pursuing its own evolutionary destiny. Let me try to envision some of these possible branches, because I think concrete speculation helps us grasp the scale of what's possible. Consider first the space dwellers humans who have adapted to life in zero-gravity or low-gravity environments. Living in space presents enormous physiological challenges. In microgravity, bones lose calcium, muscles atrophy, fluids shift toward the head, the cardiovascular system deconditions. Current astronauts can only spend limited time in space before these effects become serious, and even then they require extensive rehabilitation when they return to Earth. But what if humans were adapted to live in space permanently? What if, over thousands of generations, natural selection or directed genetic modification produced humans whose bodies functioned optimally in microgravity? Such beings might look radically different from us. They might have lighter, more gracile skeletons, since strong bones aren't needed in zero gravity. They might have more efficient cardiovascular systems, adapted to fluid distribution without gravity. They might have different limb proportions, longer arms, perhaps, or prehensile feet, useful for maneuvering in three-dimensional environments. Their senses might be different too. In space, there's no up or down, no horizon, no familiar visual references. Space-adapted humans might have enhanced spatial awareness, different vestibular systems, perhaps even new senses entirely sensitivity to magnetic fields, perhaps useful for navigation in space. And their psychology might be different as well. Living in small enclosed habitats for generations would select for certain personality traits, tolerance of confined spaces, ability to maintain social harmony in small groups, perhaps reduced aggression, and enhanced cooperation. Over 1 million years, these adaptations could accumulate to the point where space-dwelling humans are a completely different species, unable to survive on Earth, unable to interbreed with Earth-bound humans, with bodies and minds shaped by an environment that most humans will never experience. Now consider the opposite extreme humans, adapted to high-gravity environments. If we colonize large moons or planets with gravity significantly higher than Earth's, the selective pressures would be completely different. High gravity would favor stronger bones, denser muscles, more powerful hearts. High gravity humans might be shorter and stockier than us, with thicker limbs and more compact bodies. Their cardiovascular systems would need to work harder to pump blood against gravity. Their lungs might be different, adapted to breathing in denser atmospheres. Their entire metabolism might be accelerated to support the increased energy demands of moving in high gravity. Again, over 1 million years, these adaptations could produce a species completely different from both Earth humans and space-dwelling humans, a third branch on the tree of human descendants. But gravity is just one environmental factor. Consider temperature. If humans colonize very cold environments, Mars, the outer moons, perhaps asteroids in the outer solar system, they might evolve adaptations for cold tolerance. increase body fat for insulation, reduce surface area to minimize heat loss, perhaps even biochemical changes like the antifreeze proteins found in some Arctic fish that allow cells to function at lower temperatures. Cold-adapted humans might be shorter and rounder than us, with smaller ears and noses, which lose heat quickly, and larger torsos, which retain heat better. Their blood might contain different compounds. Their metabolism might be optimized for conserving energy in resource-poor environments. Conversely, humans in very hot environments, perhaps on planets closer to their stars, or in artificial habitats with high temperatures, might evolve heat tolerance, longer, thinner bodies to maximize surface area for heat dissipation, more efficient sweating mechanisms, perhaps even changes in skin color or texture to reflect more radiation. Each of these environments would produce different selective pressures, leading to different evolutionary trajectories. And over 1 million years, these trajectories would diverge dramatically. Now let me talk about something even more speculative, but perhaps more likely: the deliberate engineering of human subspecies for different purposes. Throughout history, humans have bred animals for different purposes. Dogs for hunting, herding, guarding, companionship, horses for speed, strength, endurance, cattle for meat, milk, or draft power. This selective breeding has produced enormous diversity within single species. Consider how different a Great Dane is from a Chihuahua, yet they're both dogs. What if we did the same thing to ourselves? The technology for this already exists in primitive form. Genetic screening allows parents to select embryos with desired traits. Gene editing could potentially enhance those traits further. As these technologies advance, it's not hard to imagine human populations being engineered for specific purposes. Humans optimized for intellectual work, enhanced memory, faster processing, better pattern recognition. Humans optimized for physical labor, stronger muscles, greater endurance, faster reflexes. Humans optimized for artistic expression, enhanced creativity, heightened aesthetic sensitivity, perhaps synesthesia or other unusual perceptual abilities. Humans optimized for social coordination, enhanced empathy, better communication, stronger group cohesion. Each of these optimizations would involve trade-offs. Enhanced intellectual ability might come at the cost of physical robustness. Enhanced physical capability might come at the cost of cognitive flexibility. Over time, populations optimized for different purposes would diverge, becoming increasingly specialized and increasingly different from each other. This might sound dystopian, a future of engineered castes, bred for specific roles like worker bees or soldier ants, and it might be. The ethical implications of deliberately engineering human subspecies are profound and troubling, but whether we find it appealing or appalling, it's a possibility we have to consider. The technology is advancing, the capability will exist, and over 1 million years, even slight tendencies in this direction could produce dramatic diversification. Now let me return to something I mentioned at the end of part 1, the possibility of non-biological humans. This is perhaps the most dramatic transformation I can imagine, and over 1 million years, it might also be the most likely. The key insight is that what makes us human is not primarily our biology, it's our minds, our consciousness, our memories, our personalities, our capacity for thought and feeling. Our biology is just the substrate that currently supports those minds, but there's no reason in principle why that substrate couldn't be replaced. We're already seeing the early stages of this. Brain-computer interfaces are becoming more sophisticated. Artificial intelligence is becoming more capable. The idea of uploading human minds to digital substrates, which once seemed like pure fantasy, is now taken seriously by many neuroscientists and philosophers. If mind uploading becomes possible, if we can transfer the pattern that constitutes a human mind from biological neurons to silicon circuits or some other computational medium, then the future of humanity might be primarily digital, rather than biological. What would digital humans be like? First, they would potentially be immortal. Biological bodies age and die, but digital information can be copied and preserved indefinitely. A digital human could exist for millions or billions of years, backing up their mind periodically to prevent loss from hardware failure. Second, they could be copied. Unlike biological humans, digital humans could make exact duplicates of themselves. This raises profound questions about identity. If there are 10 copies of you, which one is the real you? Are they all you? Are they separate individuals? These questions have no easy answers. Third, they could be modified easily. Changing a biological brain requires slow processes like learning or invasive interventions like surgery. Changing a digital mind might be as simple as editing code. Want to learn a new language? Just download it. Want to enhance your mathematical abilities? Upgrade your cognitive software. Want to experience the world differently? Modify your perceptual algorithms. Fourth, they could exist in virtual realities. A digital mind doesn't need a physical environment. It can exist in a simulated world of arbitrary complexity and design. Digital humans might spend most of their existence in virtual paradises of their own creation, only occasionally interacting with the physical world. Fifth, they could merge and split. Two digital minds might be able to combine into a single entity, pooling their memories and capabilities. A single mind might be able to split into multiple independent entities. The very concept of individual identity might become fluid and flexible in ways we can barely imagine. Over 1 million years, digital humans could diverge as dramatically as biological humans, perhaps more so. Different virtual environments would create different selective pressures. Different modifications would accumulate into different lineages. The descendants of uploaded minds might include entities so strange and complex that we couldn't communicate with them, couldn't understand them, couldn't even recognize them as descendants of humanity. And they might coexist with biological descendants of humanity, multiple lineages, biological and digital, pursuing different evolutionary paths through time. This brings me to a profound question. If our descendants are so different from us, in what sense are they still us? This is the ship of Theseus problem applied to an entire species. If you replace every plank of a ship one at a time, is it still the same ship? If you modify every aspect of human biology and psychology, one generation at a time, are the resulting beings still human? I don't think there's a definitive answer to this question. It depends on what you think makes something human, what essential features must be preserved for continuity of identity. Some people would say that any descendant of Homo sapiens, however modified, is still human in a meaningful sense. The lineage continues, even if the form changes. Just as I'm human despite being very different from my distant ancestors, my distant descendants would be human despite being very different from me. Others would say that humanity is defined by certain essential features, our body plan, our cognitive architecture, our social nature, and that beings who lack these features are not human regardless of their ancestry. A digital entity existing in a virtual reality with no physical body and a radically different cognitive architecture would not be human even if it descended from human uploads. I find myself somewhere in between. I think our descendants will be our heirs, the continuation of the project that began when Homo sapiens first emerged in Africa. They'll carry forward something of what we were, even if they transform it beyond recognition. In that sense, they'll be connected to us, part of our story. But I don't think they'll be human. The word human refers to something specific, a particular species with a particular biology and a particular range of psychological characteristics. Beings who lack that biology and those characteristics aren't human. Even if they descended from us, we won't be human anymore. Our descendants will be something else, many things else probably. Post-human, transhuman, non-human, digital, biological, or some combination we can't even conceptualize. They'll be our legacy, but they won't be us. And I think that's okay. In fact, I think that's how it should be. Evolution has never preserved the past. It has always moved forward, transforming and diversifying and creating new forms. The dinosaurs gave rise to birds. The early mammals gave rise to whales and bats and humans will give rise to whatever comes next. Our job is not to persist unchanged forever. Our job is to live well, to contribute what we can, and to pass the torch to those who come after. Whether those successors are recognizably human or radically different, they'll be the continuation of life's journey. And that journey is older and larger than any single species, including ours. In part 3, I want to explore the timeline of these changes, when different transformations might occur, what intermediate stages we might pass through, and what the beings of 1 million years hence might actually look like. Because while we can't predict the future with certainty, we can make educated guesses based on evolutionary principles and technological trends. And those guesses are fascinating, terrifying, and awe-inspiring in equal measure. So we've established that humanity will not remain static, that evolution never stops, that technology will accelerate our transformation, and that our descendants will likely diversify into multiple species, some biological, some digital, some combinations we can barely imagine. We won't be human anymore. We'll be something else, many things else. Now I want to take you on a journey through time. I want to walk you through what might happen at different stages, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, and finally 1 million years. Because transformation on this scale doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, step by step, generation by generation, until the cumulative changes become so vast that the beings at the end would be unrecognizable to the beings at the beginning. And I want to be clear, what I'm about to describe is speculation, informed speculation based on evolutionary principles and technological trends, but speculation nonetheless. The future is not predictable. Random events, unforeseen innovations, catastrophes, and choices we can't anticipate will all shape what actually happens. But by exploring the possibilities, we can gain insight into the forces that will shape our descendants and perhaps into the nature of evolution itself. Let's begin with the near future, the next 1,000 years. 1,000 years is a short time by evolutionary standards. Natural selection, working on random mutations, produces only modest changes over such a span. But technological change can be rapid, and the next millennium will likely be dominated by technological transformation rather than biological evolution. Consider what has happened in the last 1,000 years. In 1025 CE, the world's most advanced civilizations were medieval Europe, the Islamic Golden Age, Song Dynasty, China, and the great empires of Africa and the Americas. No one had any conception of electricity, antibiotics, airplanes, or computers. The entire technological infrastructure of the modern world, everything from smartphones to space stations, has emerged in the last few centuries, mostly in the last few decades. If technological change continues at anything like this pace, the world of 3025 CE will be as unrecognizable to us as our world would be to someone from 1025 CE. And one area where we can expect dramatic advances is human enhancement. Within the next few centuries, we'll likely develop sophisticated genetic engineering, the ability to make precise modifications to the human genome, eliminating genetic diseases, enhancing desirable traits, perhaps adding entirely new capabilities. We'll likely develop advanced brain-computer interfaces, direct connections between human minds and digital systems, allowing instant access to information, communication without speech, perhaps even sharing of thoughts and experiences. We'll likely develop significant life extension technologies, treatments that slow or reverse aging, potentially extending human lifespan to centuries rather than decades. We might develop the early stages of mind, uploading the ability to scan and preserve the information content of a human brain, even if we can't yet fully simulate it. By 3025 CE, a wealthy individual might have a genome that's been edited to remove disease risk and enhance cognitive ability. They might have implants that connect their brain to the global information network. They might expect to live for 200 or 300 years. They might have backup copies of their memories stored in case of accident or illness. Such an individual would still be recognizably human. Their body plan would be essentially the same as ours. Their psychology would be similar, shaped by the same basic drives and emotions. But they would be enhanced humans. Humans with capabilities that we would consider almost superhuman. And here's the crucial point. These enhancements would not be evenly distributed. The wealthy and powerful would have access to the best enhancements. The poor and marginalized might have little access at all. This could create a divergence within the human species, a split between enhanced and unenhanced populations that over time could widen into something like speciation. This is a troubling possibility, and one that raises profound ethical questions. Is it acceptable for some humans to be genetically or technologically enhanced while others are not? What happens to social equality when some individuals are cognitively superior, physically superior, and potentially immortal? How do we maintain a sense of shared humanity when different populations have such different capabilities? These questions will define the politics and ethics of the next millennium. How we answer them will shape the future of our species. But even setting aside the inequality issue, the widespread adoption of enhancement technologies will begin to transform what it means to be human. The baseline will shift. What we consider normal human capability will expand, and the trajectory toward post-humanity will be underway. Now let's move forward to 10,000 years from now, the year 12025 CE, if we're still using that calendar. 10,000 years is still short by evolutionary standards, but it's long enough for significant biological changes to accumulate, especially if those changes are being directed by technology. Consider what has happened in the last 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, humans had just invented agriculture. We lived in small villages with no writing, no metal tools, no cities. Since then, we've developed every aspect of civilization, and we've also changed biologically. Humans today are different from humans 10,000 years ago. We're taller on average. Our faces are flatter, our jaws smaller, our teeth more crowded. We've evolved lactose tolerance in some populations, resistance to certain diseases, and probably cognitive changes as well, though these are harder to measure. If natural selection can produce these changes in 10,000 years, imagine what natural selection plus directed genetic engineering could produce. By 12025